My granddaughter was being bullied at her new school because of the burn scars on her arms. I went to confront the bully's father. But when he saw my granddaughter's scars, his face went pale. "I know those scars," he whispered. At that moment, I knew there was more to this story than bullying. The rage that had been building in my chest for weeks suddenly turned cold, replaced by something I couldn't name. Fear? Recognition? I don't know, but whatever it was made my hands shake. Before we begin, please like this video, subscribe, and drop a comment with where you're watching from: morning in Lagos, night in New York, or afternoon in London. I need to know I'm not alone in this world when I tell you what happened next. My name is Ruth. I'm 67 years old, and I've been raising my granddaughter Lily since she was 3. 3 years old. That's when the fire took everything from her: her parents, her home, her innocence, and left her with scars that snake up both her arms like angry red rivers. Scars that would mark her for life, reminding the world and herself every single day of the worst moment in her young existence. You want to know about pain? Try explaining to a 3-year-old why mommy and daddy aren't coming home. Try watching her trace those scars with tiny fingers, asking why she looks different from other children. Try being the only thing standing between that beautiful soul and a world that judges before it understands. The fire happened on a Tuesday night in March. I'll never forget the call. 2:47 a.m., the hospital, a voice telling me my daughter and son-in-law were gone, but somehow, miraculously, my granddaughter had survived. Survived, but not unscathed. Never unscathed. The flames had grabbed her little arms as the firefighters pulled her from the wreckage, leaving their mark like some cruel signature. For 14 years, I've watched Lily grow into the most remarkable young woman despite everything life threw at her. She's brilliant, gets straight A's, reads everything she can get her hands on, draws these incredible pictures that make you forget to breathe. But she's also broken in ways that no child should ever be broken. She hides her arms, wears long sleeves even in summer, and flinches when people look too long. I thought, God, how naive was I? I thought that moving her to Lincoln Preparatory Academy would be different. Better. It's supposed to be this prestigious school with smaller classes, more individual attention, teachers who actually care. I scraped together every penny I had, worked double shifts at the diner for months, because I believed my Lily deserved better than the overcrowded public school where she was just another face in the crowd. What a fool I was. What an absolute fool. The bullying didn't start immediately. At first, it was just stares. Kids would look at her arms when she rolled up her sleeves in art class, whisper behind their hands, point when they thought she wasn't looking. Lily would come home and tell me about it like it was nothing, like she was used to it. And maybe she was. Maybe that's what broke my heart the most, that my beautiful granddaughter had learned to expect cruelty from the world. But then it got worse. It always gets worse, doesn't it? The stares turned into comments. "What happened to your arms?" they'd ask, not out of curiosity or kindness, but with that particular brand of childhood cruelty that cuts deeper than any adult insult ever could. Lily would mumble something about an accident and try to change the subject, but kids are like sharks when they smell blood in the water. The worst part was watching her start to believe what they said about her. She'd stand in front of the bathroom mirror, pulling at her sleeves, asking me if she was ugly. Ugly. This child who survived something that should have killed her, who fought her way back from the brink of death, who had more strength in her little finger than most adults have in their entire bodies. She thought she was ugly because some privileged little monsters couldn't see past her scars. I tried talking to her teacher, Mrs. Henderson. Nice enough woman, I suppose, but completely overwhelmed with 30 kids and no real authority to do anything meaningful. "I'll keep an eye on things," she said, which is teacher speak for, "I'll do absolutely nothing but hope the problem goes away." Then I went to the principal, Mr. Davies. Sat in his office with its fancy diplomas on the wall and its view of the manicured campus, and listened to him spout policy after policy about their zero tolerance for bullying. Zero tolerance. What a joke. Their zero tolerance meant they'd investigate every incident thoroughly, which apparently took weeks, and they'd speak to all parties involved, which changed nothing, and they'd implement appropriate consequences, which were so mild they might as well have handed out participation trophies. Meanwhile, my granddaughter was dying inside. Every day, she came home a little smaller, a little more defeated. She stopped raising her hand in class, stopped eating lunch in the cafeteria, started asking to be homeschooled. The light in her eyes, that spark that had kept her going through every surgery, every therapy session, every nightmare about the fire, it was dimming. And I was powerless to stop it. The boy's name was Aaron. Aaron Cartwright. 12 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, the kind of kid who probably had everything handed to him his entire life. He was the ringleader, the one who turned casual staring into active torment. He called her monster arms loud enough for everyone to hear. He'd pretend to be afraid when she walked by, covering his eyes and making scared noises. He convinced other kids to avoid sitting next to her because her scars might be contagious. Monster arms. That phrase still makes my blood boil. This child, this innocent baby who had been through hell and somehow came out the other side with her humanity intact, and this little sociopath called her a monster. I wanted to find his parents and ask them what kind of home they were running that produced such a heartless creature. The day everything changed was a Thursday in November. Lily came home with her school shirt torn, the sleeve ripped from shoulder to wrist, exposing her scars for everyone to see. She was sobbing so hard she could barely speak, but eventually, she managed to tell me what happened. Aaron had grabbed her during recess, yanked on her sleeve, and ripped it apart while yelling for everyone to come see the monster's arms. That was it. That was the moment something snapped inside me. 14 years of protecting this child, 14 years of watching her struggle and overcome and grow despite everything, and some spoiled brat thought he could humiliate her for sport? No, absolutely not. I was done with policies and procedures and letting other people handle this. It was time for direct action. That night, after Lily had cried herself to sleep, I sat in my kitchen drinking cold coffee and planning what I was going to do. The school had failed us. The teachers had failed us. The administration had failed us. But I wouldn't fail her. I couldn't. She was all I had left of my daughter, and I'd be damned if I let some punk kid destroy what the fire couldn't. I looked up Aaron Cartwright's address in the school directory. The Cartwrights lived in Maple Heights, the fancy part of town with the big houses and perfect lawns. Of course they did. I pictured them in their pristine home, probably laughing about their son's funny stories from school, never once considering that their child was systematically destroying another human being. The next morning, after dropping Lily off at school, she begged me not to make her go, but I couldn't let Aaron think he'd won. I drove straight to the Cartwright house. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, partly from anger, partly from adrenaline. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say 100 times, but now that I was actually there, pulling into their circular driveway, the words felt inadequate. How do you explain to someone that their child is a monster? How do you make them understand the damage they've allowed to happen? How do you convey 14 years of love and protection and watching your granddaughter suffer without sounding like a crazy old woman? I rang the doorbell with more force than necessary. When the door opened, I was ready for battle. Ready to face some entitled suburban parent who'd probably try to minimize their son's behavior or blame my granddaughter for being different. I was ready for excuses and deflection and maybe even hostility. What I wasn't ready for was the man who answered the door. He was probably in his 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, but there was something worn about him. Tired. His hair was graying at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. But what caught my attention immediately were the scars. Burn scars on his hands and forearms, different from Lily's, but unmistakably from fire. This wasn't some pampered suburban dad. This was someone who understood pain. "Can I help you?" he asked, and his voice was gentle, cautious. Not what I'd expected at all. Are you Aaron Cartwright's father? I demanded, my prepared anger still burning hot despite my surprise at his appearance. Yes, I'm David Cartwright. Is everything okay? No, everything is not okay, I snapped. Your son has been tormenting my granddaughter at school, bullying her because of her scars, calling her names, humiliating her in front of her classmates. Yesterday, he physically assaulted her and destroyed her clothing. And I want to know what you're going to do about it. The words came out in a rush, fueled by weeks of frustration and helpless rage. I watched his face change as I spoke, saw something shift in his expression. Not defensiveness or denial like I'd expected, but something deeper. Concern. Maybe even fear. Scars, he said quietly. What kind of scars? The question threw me off. What did it matter what kind? Scars were scars, and his son was using them as weapons against my granddaughter. But something in his tone made me reach for my phone, scroll through my photos until I found one of Lily. It was from her birthday last month, her sleeves pushed up as she blew out the candles on her cake, the burn scars clearly visible on both arms. I held out the phone, ready to show him exactly what his son was mocking, exactly what kind of cruelty he was raising his child to inflict on others. But when David Cartwright saw that photo, everything changed. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. His eyes went wide, focused on the screen with an intensity that was almost frightening. His hands started to shake, actually shake, as he stared at the image of my granddaughter. I know those scars, he whispered, and his voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear him. Those 4 words changed everything. The anger I'd been carrying, the righteous fury that had driven me to his doorstep, suddenly evaporated, replaced by something cold and uncertain. How could he know her scars? How could this stranger, this father of the boy who'd been tormenting her, possibly know anything about my Lily's scars? What did you say? I asked, though I'd heard him perfectly. I needed him to say it again, needed to be sure I wasn't imagining things. Those scars, he repeated, still staring at the photo. The pattern, the placement. I know those scars. I've seen them before. He looked up at me then, and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach drop. Recognition. Guilt. Pain so deep it took my breath away. What's your granddaughter's name? He asked. Lily. Lily Morrison. He closed his eyes, took a shuddering breath, and when he opened them again, there were tears there. The Morrison house fire, he said. 14 years ago. Maple Street. It felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. How did he know about the fire? How did he know the address? The only people who knew those details were family, investigators, and... You're a firefighter, I breathed. He nodded slowly. I was. Retired now. But yes, I was on duty that night. I was part of the crew that responded to the call. The world seemed to tilt sideways. This man, this father of the boy who'd been making my granddaughter's life hell, had been there that night. Had been there when everything fell apart, when my daughter and son-in-law died, when Lily's life changed forever. Which one are you? I asked, though part of me already knew. Part of me had always wondered about the man who'd carried Lily out of that burning house. I'm the one who found her, he said quietly. In the back bedroom, under her little bed. She was unconscious from the smoke, and her arms were already burned. I carried her out. I had to sit down. My legs just gave out, and I found myself on his front steps, staring up at this man who had saved my granddaughter's life. This man whose son had spent weeks trying to destroy her spirit. You saved her, I whispered. I tried to save them all, he said, and his voice cracked. I went back for her parents, but the ceiling came down. The whole second floor collapsed. I couldn't get to them. I've carried that guilt for 14 years. We sat there in silence for a long moment, both of us processing this impossible coincidence. The firefighter who'd saved Lily's life was the father of the boy who'd been tormenting her. The man who'd given her a second chance was raising the child who was trying to take her spirit away. Does Aaron know? I asked finally. David shook his head. He knows I used to be a firefighter. He knows I retired early because of an injury. But he doesn't know about that night. Doesn't know about the people we couldn't save. I've never talked about it. Why not? Because how do you explain to a child that his father failed? How do you tell him that despite all the training, all the equipment, all the bravery in the world, sometimes you can't save everyone? How do you live with yourself when you know a little girl will grow up without her parents because you weren't fast enough, strong enough, good enough? I understood then. This man had been carrying his own scars all these years, invisible ones that cut just as deep as the burns on his hands. He'd saved my granddaughter's life, and instead of being celebrated as a hero, he'd tortured himself for the lives he couldn't save. You did save someone, I told him. You saved the most important person in my world. He looked at me with surprise, as if the thought had never occurred to him. Aaron doesn't know any of this, he continued. He just sees a girl with scars, and kids can be cruel when they don't understand. But this changes everything. He needs to know the truth. Will you tell him? Will you be there when I do? I nodded. This conversation needed to happen, and Lily's side of the story needed to be represented. More than that, I needed to see this boy's reaction when he learned the truth. I needed to know if there was any hope for redemption, any chance that this could end with something other than more pain. That afternoon, we sat in the Cartwrights' living room, David, myself, and Aaron. The boy looked exactly like I'd expected, blonde, privileged, sullen. He clearly didn't understand why he was in trouble or why some strange old woman was sitting in his house. Aaron, David began, I need to tell you about something that happened before you were born. Something that changed my life and yours in ways you don't understand. He told the story slowly, carefully. The call that came in at 2:30 a.m. The house already engulfed in flames when they arrived. The desperate search for survivors. Finding a little girl unconscious under her bed, her arms already burned, barely breathing. I carried that little girl out of the fire, David said, looking directly at his son. She was 3 years old. Her name was Lily Morrison. Aaron's face went pale. Even at 12, he wasn't stupid. He knew where this was going. The girl you've been bullying at school, David continued, the one you call names because of her scars, the one whose shirt you tore yesterday, she's the same child I nearly died trying to save 14 years ago. The silence in that room was deafening. Aaron stared at his father, then at me, then back at his father. I watched as understanding dawned in his eyes, followed immediately by horror. Dad, he whispered. Those scars you've been mocking are proof that she survived something that should have killed her. They're evidence of the worst night of her life, and the worst night of mine. Her parents died in that fire, Aaron. She lost everything. And instead of showing her compassion, you've been adding to her pain. Aaron started crying then. Not the manipulative tears of a child caught in trouble, but deep, wrenching sobs of genuine remorse. He looked at me with eyes full of shame and asked, "Is she okay? Did I hurt her really bad?" "Yes," I said simply. "You hurt her very badly. She comes home crying almost every day. She thinks she's ugly because of what you and your friends say about her. She's asked me to homeschool her because she can't stand going to school anymore." I didn't know, he sobbed. I didn't know about the fire or her parents or anything. She looked different, and the other kids were staring, and I thought. You thought it would be fun to join in, I finished. You thought her pain was entertainment. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Can I tell her I'm sorry? Can I make it better? I looked at this broken 12-year-old and saw something I hadn't expected, genuine remorse. Real understanding of the harm he'd caused. Maybe there was hope after all. Telling her you're sorry is a start, I said. But sorry isn't enough. You've spent weeks destroying her confidence, making her feel like a monster. It's going to take more than words to undo that damage. What can I do? He asked. Tell me what to do, and I'll do it. David reached over and put his hand on his son's shoulder. You can start by telling your classmates the truth. Tell them that Lily's scars are a sign of strength, not something to be ashamed of. Tell them what you learned today. And you can stand up for her, I added. When other kids stare or whisper, You can redirect their attention. When someone makes a cruel comment, you can shut it down. You can be the protection she needs instead of the threat she fears. Aaron nodded eagerly, wiping his nose on his sleeve. I'll do that. I promise I'll do that. But do you think she'll ever forgive me? That's up to her, I said. Forgiveness isn't something you can demand or expect. It's something you have to earn. And it might take a long time. The next day was a Friday. I drove Lily to school as usual, but this time, David and Aaron were waiting in the parking lot. Lily saw them and immediately grabbed my arm, fear flashing in her eyes. It's okay, I told her. They want to talk to you. They have something important to say. Aaron approached slowly, his hands shaking. When he was close enough, he looked directly into Lily's eyes, maybe the first time he'd ever really looked at her as a person instead of a target. Lily, he said, I need to tell you something. My dad was one of the firefighters who saved you when you were little. He pulled you out of the fire that gave you those scars. Lily's eyes went wide. She looked at David, taking in his scarred hands, and I saw the pieces clicking together in her mind. I didn't know, Aaron continued. I didn't know about the fire or about your parents or how brave you are. I've been horrible to you and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Lily didn't say anything for a long moment. She just stared at this boy who had made her life miserable, processing his apology, trying to decide if she could trust it. You called me a monster, she said finally, and her voice was steady despite the tears in her eyes. You're not a monster, Aaron said firmly. You're the opposite of a monster. My dad told me what happened that night, how you survived something that should have killed you. Your scars aren't ugly. They're proof that you're stronger than anything life can throw at you. Why were you so mean to me? Aaron looked down at his feet, ashamed. Because I was stupid. Because I didn't understand. Because I thought it was funny to make other people feel bad, and that makes me the real monster. Lily considered this, then looked at David. You really saved me? David knelt down to her level. I did what any firefighter would do. But yes, I carried you out of that house. You were so small, so brave. Even unconscious, you were fighting. I don't remember, Lily said softly. That's probably for the best, David replied. But I remember. I've never forgotten. Lily turned back to Aaron. If I forgive you, will you promise to never call anyone names again? Not just me, but anyone. I promise, Aaron said immediately. I swear I'll never do anything like this again. Lily nodded slowly. Okay, I forgive you. But it's going to take time for me to trust you. I understand, Aaron said. I'll wait as long as it takes. That was the beginning of something beautiful. Aaron didn't just apologize, he transformed. He became Lily's protector at school, shutting down any comments about her scars before they could gain traction. He sat with her at lunch, included her in group projects, made sure she never felt isolated or alone. More than that, he helped her see her scars differently. Instead of hiding them, she started wearing short sleeves again. When curious kids asked about them, Aaron would step in and explain that they were marks of survival, proof of strength, evidence of a warrior who'd faced the worst and come out victorious. The transformation wasn't just in Aaron either. Lily began to stand straighter, smile more, participate in class discussions. The light in her eyes that had been dimming for months started to shine bright again. She made friends, real friends who saw past her scars to the remarkable person underneath. David and I started spending time together too, bonding over our shared connection to that terrible night 14 years ago. He told me about the nightmares he'd had, the guilt that had driven him to early retirement, the way he'd struggled to be present for his own family while carrying the weight of the lives he couldn't save. I told him about the years of surgeries and therapy, about watching Lily fight her way back to health, about the challenges of raising a traumatized child while dealing with my own grief over losing my daughter. We found healing in each other's stories. David finally began to see himself as the hero he'd always been instead of the failure he thought he was. I began to understand that not all scars are visible, and that sometimes the people who save us carry wounds just as deep as our own. The friendship between our families grew stronger with each passing week. David would come to Lily's art shows and cheer louder than anyone when her drawings were displayed. Aaron would spend afternoons at our house, doing homework with Lily and listening to her stories about her parents. I would cook dinner for the Cartwrights when David had to work late, and we'd all sit around the table sharing our days like the family we'd unexpectedly become. One evening, about 6 months after that first confrontation on David's doorstep, Lily was showing Aaron some old photo albums. There were pictures from before the fire, her parents, their house, family vacations, and birthday parties. Aaron listened intently as she shared memories of her mom and dad, asking questions that showed he genuinely cared about understanding her past. Then she showed him the pictures from after the fire. Hospital rooms, bandaged arms, physical therapy sessions. But also moments of joy, her first day home, learning to draw with her healing hands, small victories celebrated with huge smiles. "You know what I think?" Aaron said, studying a photo of Lily at age 5, proudly showing off a picture she'd drawn despite her still healing arms. "What?" "I think your scars tell the best story ever. They say you're a survivor. They say you're brave. They say you don't give up, no matter what happens to you." Lily smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, it wasn't tinged with self-consciousness about her appearance. It was pure joy. "Maybe you're right," she said. "Maybe they do tell a good story." As I watched this exchange from the kitchen doorway, I thought about how drastically our lives had changed. 6 months ago, I'd driven to the Cartwright house filled with rage, ready to confront the parents of my granddaughter's tormentor. I'd expected a fight, maybe even a police call. What I'd found instead was healing I didn't even know we needed. The fire had taken so much from us, Lily's parents, her innocence, our sense of security. But it had also given us something unexpected, a connection to a man who dedicated his life to saving others, and a chance for his son to learn compassion through understanding. Lily's scars would always be there. They would always be a reminder of the worst day of her life. But they'd also become something else, a bridge between families, a teacher of empathy, a symbol of survival and strength. Sometimes I catch Lily tracing those scars absent-mindedly, and instead of the shame I used to see in her face, there's something different now. Acceptance. Maybe even pride. She's learned that her scars don't define her limitations. They showcase her limitless strength. Aaron has become the big brother I never thought Lily would have. He's protective without being overbearing, supportive without being condescending. He's learned that true strength isn't about making others feel small, but about lifting them up when the world tries to knock them down. David has found peace with his past, understanding finally that saving one life, saving Lily's life, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The guilt that had haunted him for 14 years has been replaced by gratitude for the unexpected family that tragedy brought into his life. And me? I've learned that sometimes the people who hurt us the most aren't evil, they're just lost. Sometimes the greatest enemy can become the greatest ally if we're willing to look past the surface and see the pain underneath. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives can lead to the most beautiful connections. What would you have done if your grandchild was bullied for something they couldn't change? Would you have had the patience to see past your anger to find the deeper truth? Would you have been able to forgive the way Lily did? Tell me in the comments. I look at these two kids now, laughing over homework and planning weekend adventures, and I'm amazed by the capacity humans have for redemption. Aaron went from being Lily's worst nightmare to being one of her best friends. Lily went from victim to victor, learning to see her scars as proof of her strength instead of evidence of her difference. The bullying didn't just stop, it reversed completely. Aaron's transformation influenced other kids in their class, teaching them that differences should be celebrated, not mocked. Lily became something of a celebrity at school, not because of her scars, but because of her incredible story of survival and the unlikely friendship that grew from the ashes of cruelty. Drop your country and time right now. Nigeria, Canada, the UK. I love seeing where you're watching from. I love knowing that this story of healing and redemption is reaching people all over the world. Because that's what we need more of in this world: understanding instead of judgment, compassion instead of cruelty, healing instead of hurt. The fire 14 years ago took away my daughter and son-in-law. It scarred my granddaughter's body and left trauma in her heart. It filled a firefighter with guilt for the lives he couldn't save. But from those ashes grew something beautiful, a friendship that defied logic, a healing that transcended pain, and a lesson that the deepest wounds can sometimes become the strongest bonds. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because stories like this remind us that scars can carry not just pain, but powerful truths. They remind us that sometimes what divides us can become what unites us. They show us that forgiveness isn't just about letting go of anger, it's about opening our hearts to possibilities we never imagined. Lily still has her scars. They're still visible on her arms, still a permanent reminder of that terrible night. But now when people stare, she doesn't hide. When they ask questions, she tells her story with pride. When they show pity, she shows them strength. Because she's learned something that took me 67 years to understand: our scars don't make us broken. They make us human. They connect us to others who've faced their own fires and found their own ways to survive. They remind us that healing is possible, that love can grow in the darkest places, and that sometimes the very thing that threatens to destroy us becomes the foundation for something more beautiful than we ever imagined. That's the truth I want to leave you with today. Your scars, whatever they are, wherever they came from, they're not your weakness. They're your proof of strength. They're your evidence of survival. They're your invitation to connect with others who understand that life can be brutal and beautiful, painful and precious, devastating and redemptive all at the same time. Thank you for listening to our story. Thank you for seeing past the surface to the heart underneath. Thank you for believing that healing is possible, that forgiveness can transform enemies into family, and that love really can grow from the ashes of pain.